Let me catch you up on current events. If you could see New York right now, you would think it had taken us a year to get here. Trash choking the streets, abandoned vehicles everywhere, Sarah outposts and depots on every block, the walls of the dark zone cutting through the middle of Manhattan. But saddest of all, the bodies. Manhattan has a population, had a population of about 2 million people, and on weekdays the commuters pushed that up to 4 million. The virus killed enough people to fill up Central Park, and enough to put piles and piles of bodies and coffins in the dark zone. All of this happened in a month. The virus was unleashed on Black Friday at Abel's department store. Yeah, you got it. The place where they have the Thanksgiving Day parade every year. Someone figured out that a virus can survive on a dollar bill for days, and they went out and used all these contaminated bills in the biggest store in the world on the busiest day of the year. When it was discovered, we called it things like dollar flu, green poison. Within a couple of weeks, thousands were dead and probably hundreds of thousands more were sick. The doctors realized that it wasn't just another flu season within days, but no one understood what it really was until it was too late. There just wasn't enough resources to find and quarantine all the sick. With so many dead and dying and everyone getting scared, everything broke down pretty fast. The military came in and set up a quarantine area right in the middle of Manhattan. You know, when you wall off Central Park and the Empire State Building, you know that people are going to feel some kind of way about that. But when the military was going out and just taking people from hospitals, their homes, and putting them in the quarantine area, people got angry. Yes, people were dying, but it was too fast. No one had the whole picture like the government and the military, and they were very reluctant to share the real horror of the situation. The purpose of the quarantine area, the decontamination zone, was to isolate the disease from healthy people. The sick and the dead were sent there to be logged and processed by trained people in hazmat suits to make sure the dead weren't spreading the sickness, and so families could at least know where their dead were buried after the crisis was over. Doctors and scientists, the best and the brightest, came in to study the virus, but the bottom line for most of it was that after you were taken into the decontamination zone, you never came out. The speed at which the virus spread forced Sarah, aka the Catastrophic Emergency Response Agency, to expand the decontamination zone many times, sometimes giving people only hours to leave before sealing off their street and putting up walls around their buildings. At the end, there was a massive but short-lived effort to screen and evacuate all of Manhattan. As more sick were being found in the surrounding areas, this effort was abandoned. But all tunnels and bridges that had been closed and sealed off remained that way. The uninfected either found a way out off of Manhattan or started to find other ways to survive in Manhattan. Food, medicine, sundries were being airdropped into the island and distributed by Sarah. But it was like any other government bureaucracy, slow, unadaptable, too little, too late. The civil unrest was exploding like a nightmare where things were getting worse. But the more you do to fix things, the angrier everyone gets at you. There were daily protests at the gates of the decontamination zone. And while this was happening, the inmates in Rikers prison broke out and came down to Manhattan. Almost all 20,000 of them. It was sometime after the convicts in orange jumpsuits started appearing around Midtown that the power in the quarantine area went out. As the afternoon wore on and the military couldn't restore the power grid, the order came down to evacuate all their personnel in a few hours. Before nightfall, with the lights out and the military gone, all the wrong kinds of people were finding their way in there to snap up all the supplies and weapons left behind from our lovely Sarah and military, and the decontamination zone became a dark zone. After the fall of the quarantine area, hope died. Even though no one liked it, we knew they were working on a cure in there. It didn't take long for people to band together into gangs of rioters. Lots of city workers that have been trying to keep the basic services going, like trash pickups, utilities, they gave up. They ganged up, trying to do what, in their minds, they thought the feds couldn't do: eradicate the disease by burning it out. We call these guys the cleaners, because a lot of them have been garbage men, keeping the streets clean. And because now they were doing the same thing by burning bodies. But half the time, it didn't seem to matter if the people they burned were still alive, and basically, if you so much as coughed, they just assumed the worst and torched you. What was left of the cops, National Guards, and other alphabet agencies, they got together and made the Joint Task Force, JTF. But with everything falling apart, supplies low, morale low, it was going to take a miracle to pull the city back from a brink of total chaos. The Strategic Homeland Division, or just the Division, was an agency created by executive order, and they were meant to be the last line of defense in the face of catastrophic disasters. They have special training to deal with the unthinkable threats and carte blanche authority to do whatever it takes to reestablish the rule of law after everything else has failed. The first wave of agents had been activated a few weeks after Black Friday, but there just weren't enough of them. A second wave was activated a little after New Year's, but within weeks they had established the Farley Post Office as the base of operations in Manhattan, found the necessary people to staff it, and taken out the leaders of the biggest factions trying to take over New York. People were organizing, and there were supplies being distributed. Hope was rekindled. The world would never be the same again, but the race was on to find a cure of the disease. What follows is the story of one division agent who went beyond the call of duty.
Part 1. Through the Blizzard. Chapter 1. Klein, I need you back at the Boo in 30 minutes. Report to Lau, came a gruff voice over the Isaac comms. It was Rhodes, the head of the tech wing at the base of operations, Boo, not one of the dispatchers. Klein's brow pinched. Copy that, en route, he replied quickly. Something big is brewing, he guessed. He started walking back, picking his way through the abandoned cars and rubble in Hudson Yards, amongst the still proud brick and plaster buildings. Klein stopped to give some granola bars and canned food to some hungry civilians he found along the way and chat for a minute. They gave him some good intel on a high-value target that had become a big problem in Hell's Kitchen over the last couple weeks. This was noted in his computer, uploaded to the Isaac network, and either he or some other agent in the vicinity would get the assignment shortly. That's how it worked. Soon enough, he could see the familiar shape of the post office building. He had to go around to the east side because all other entrances were closed and locked for security. But he didn't mind. Seeing all the steps and columns of the east facade always inspired him. It was the people they were fighting to save, not buildings of stone and steel, he told himself. But this building made you feel proud to be part of the fight. The Farley Post Office building had been built in 1912, before the First World War, and bears the inscription, "Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from their swift completion of their appointed rounds," across the front. The Beaux Arts style of the building was originally designed to match the style of Pennsylvania Station, which used to face the post office across the street of 8th Avenue. As freeways and cars replaced train usage, the magnificent train station diminished until the above-ground levels were demolished and replaced in the 1960s by Madison Square Garden. As he came up through the decontamination tunnel, he immediately saw that Fei Lau was not at her desk. He would have to find her. Fei had gotten too close to a bomb in Brooklyn just after being activated and had almost been killed before she even made it to Manhattan. Despite getting blown halfway to hell, she bandaged up and took the place of the former SHD commander who had been killed in the same explosion. She had been directing division efforts for the last month from a desk at the front of the base, where she could see all the agents coming and going with her remaining eye, as she hobbled around with a crutch, impatiently waiting for her leg to heal. Klein made a right turn and poked his head around the corner and saw Benitez standing behind his desk, talking to some JTFers with a clipboard in hand. Benitez glanced over and held up a finger, but continued his briefing. Klein held up a hand and pointed towards Lau's desk, then opened his hand. "Where is she?" Benitez shook his head slightly towards Klein in between sentences. "I don't know." Klein went into the central corridor under the stairs. With a tap of his watch, a holographic map sprung up around him. Only he could see it, as it was being displayed on special contact lenses he wore that were connected to his Intelligent System Analytic Computer, ISAC for short. Standard equipment for every division agent. The ISAC device was a small dark wedge perched on his shoulder, clipped to a strap on his backpack. There was a glowing orange circle on top and a thick, flat 6-inch long antenna along the side. Lau was down in the terminal. It was a subway station platform under the post office, now a hub for division agents, where they could calibrate their weapons and gear, receive high-value target assignments, and prepare for missions. He took the stairs down to the terminal, passing the security wing on the right and the medical wing to the left. The tech wing was upstairs. The entire building had been converted into a base of operations, or the BOO, for the time being. As he came into the cavernous room of the terminal, he saw Lau in a small room off to the right side that connected to a freight elevator. She was a petite Asian woman, early 30s, with black hair cut very short, talking to 7 agents inside, and he could see her through the window. She was still wearing bandages around her head, covering one of her eyes, and a cast on her left leg. 3 agents loitered in the vestibule outside the room, and he joined them. Apparently, they had all gotten similar messages to come quickly. The briefing inside the small room ended, and the 7 agents began putting on hazmat suits, filing into the freight elevator and going up to the roof. Faye hobbled over, opened the door, and motioned them in. She was looking better, but it was clear she wasn't ready to go into the field yet. Still, she always wore her tac vest, as ready for action as she could be, regardless of her physical condition. As the group of 7 inside was suiting up, more agents had come in to wait with Klein and the others, so they were now 7 as well. As they filed in and found places to stand, Faye spoke up. "Thanks for coming so quickly. We have a lead on something big. We needed to get several teams ready to go ASAP. First, I hate to say this, but there are lots of eyes and ears in the booth that might talk to the wrong people. So you're going to have to be radio silent to any other agents until this op is over. Look around. This is your team." The agents looked at each other with a few head nods and thumbs up at each other, but they didn't say much, mostly just wanting Faye to get on with it. "Here it is," Faye explained, putting her chin down and looking hard at the group. "We have the locations of experimental antivirals that were left behind in the Dark Zone. As far as we can tell, this is as far as the doctors and scientists got before they evacuated. This could be a serious help to Candle in figuring out a cure for the pandemic, maybe even the silver bullet in killing this thing for good. And before you ask, she's optimistic. But my guess is that she's still months away from developing a vaccine without something like this." It was like she dropped a bomb of silence on the room. Everyone knew what this could mean, and the weight of what was at stake quietly settled over them. "Antivirals? Not like a vaccine?" another agent asked, an older guy with a shaven head. Klein was fairly certain his name was Barry Ellis. Another agent piped up before Lau could answer. "Green poison is mutating too rapidly and hasn't settled into a dominant strain that we can vaccinate for yet. but antivirals can target it and give us a short-term solution, and gets us closer to a vaccine as well. Klein remembered this younger agent knew about infectious diseases. She went by Roxy or something like that. "Where are we going?" an agent asked. Klein knew him as McPherson. Lau leaned back. "We picked all of you based on 2 criteria. How much time you've been in the DZ, and how close you were to the boo. The coordinates of the antivirals are being sent to your ISACs. Once you get into the DZ, ISAC will vector you in." "But you can't just tell us," McPherson pressed. "We're not taking any chances," Lau gruffed. "There are several possible locations for the antivirals. 4 teams of 7, 4 helicopters. First one to get the case of antivirals wins." "Wait, 7? We've always gone in 4-man teams," another agent piped up. "One agent will stay in the helo and act as a crew chief, or sub in for a member of the ground team if needed," Lau explained. "And we're beefing up the teams to 6, so you can easily overwhelm any resistance you might encounter." "It sounds easy enough," Joan said wearily. A raven-haired female Agent Klein had worked with once before. Lau leaned in. "Now here's the bad news. There's a blizzard coming in. It's going to make Sandy look like a snowball fight. Rhodes says it's probably going to bork all our comms, so if you're caught in it, you'll be on your own. You'll have an hour, 2 at most, to get in and out, but we feel that the payoff here is worth the risk. That's why I had to get you in here so quick. There's one more thing, and you're really not going to like it," Lau said, pausing and taking a deep breath. "To try and avoid any hostile engagements, we want you to ditch your elite gear and weapons and go in like you're a team of scientists. We're hoping that if you're sighted, that they won't feel that it's worth tangling with you since you'll outnumber them, and you won't have anything that looks good enough to fight over. We've got some hazmat suits and ventilators in here ready to go, and plenty of gear and guns," Lau told them, pointing. This raised some eyebrows and dropped some jaws, but before anyone could start, Lau continued quickly. "I want all of you sharp, ready for anything in case of any unexpected—" "Now wait a minute," Romanov interrupted. "We're going in without the gear that gives us the advantage against all the punks with military-grade gear in there?" he asked, getting louder as he continued. "We'll be attacked on sight, whatever gear we have," McPherson argued. "Those suits aren't very warm," Jones added. I know. But even with generic gear and standard weapons, in a team of 6 with all your SHD tech, you're all more than a match for anything you'll run into," Lau tried to reason. No way. I'll risk my life for this antivirals, but telling us to strip down like this is crazy. It's a bad call, Lau. I'm not doing it," Romanov piped up. "Fine, but you'll be under lockdown until the mission is over, and there'll be a man short. There's a stash right there that'll keep all of your gear and guns safe until you get back," Lau told them quietly. The disappointment in the room was palpable. It was nice not to be yelled at for disobeying orders or insubordination, and this is why they all respected Lau. She didn't pretend that it was all going to be fine as long as they did as they were told. She, more than a lot of them, knew exactly what it meant to put yourself on the line and keep going when everything was telling you to quit. Hopefully, this will be a get in, grab the package, and get out. But we never get that lucky, do we? I know this is a gamble, but having an extra 5-10 seconds because someone hemmed and hawed about whether or not to engage could be the edge we need," Lau opined. The other agents looked at Romanov steadily. "Now, what's it gonna be, buddy?" McPherson asked, spreading his hands and tilting his head. Romanov pressed his lips together and finally sighed and rolled his eyes. "All right, I'm in," he said with a smirk, already pulling off his holster. The others slapped his shoulders and high-fived him. "My man," Klein told him with a smile and gave his cheek a gentle slap. Despite the bravado, it was a lot to take in. A chance to cure the green poison, to end this nightmare, Klein thought as he stripped down and put on the generic gear that was waiting in the lockers for them. Gear up, get up to the roof, and grab your seat on the chopper, Lau called out, and limped for the door. Klein went over and held the door for Lau. Lau paused and turned back to him. I know how well you know the Dark Zone, Klein, she said quietly, and I know why you've spent so much time there. We need you focused today, all right? You can keep looking for them tomorrow. Klein looked stonily at Faye. He hadn't told anyone about his search. It was too personal. Somehow she had figured it out. But she was right, and he nodded. Lau nodded back and left. Contamination suits are put on over the clothes, giving the wearer a disposable layer of protection against infected bodily fluids and airborne biohazards. But there wasn't room for coats and bulky layers, so they had to shed any extra layers they had to put them on. There were 4 colors: blue, red, yellow, and black. Klein wanted a black suit, but the others took those, and he had to take the more traditional, but far less tactical, yellow suit. They used duct tape at the wrists, ankles, and neck to make sure they had a good seal against any contaminants getting inside. Last, they all had ventilator masks that covered their entire faces. They put Kevlar vests on over the suits, grabbed the standard issue sling packs and guns, and headed to the elevator. As soon as the roof doors opened, flurries of snow blew inside. It was 5:30 p.m., and the sky was dark and filled with stormy clouds, but some orange light from the sunset was creeping through. The wind chill was cutting right through the hazmat suits, and no one wasted time getting aboard the helicopter. 2 facing front, 2 facing backwards, 3 in the back. They were going south to loop back around into the Dark Zone from the east side. After the doors were closed, the Helo's engines revved up, and they all felt themselves rising, being pressed into their seats as the craft took flight. It was loud, and they all silently prepared for a fast and furious mission to the Dark Zone. McPherson spoke up after a few moments, breaking the silence. Okay, who's taking the lead once we're in there? Klein disliked McPherson. McPherson had been in Special Forces and always wanted a clear chain of command, preferably with him on top. He was capable, smart, and gave just as much as he expected everyone to give, but, in Klein's opinion, he could never seem to leave well enough alone. Klein didn't really want to be taking orders from him, but he didn't want McPherson second-guessing him if he were in command even more. McPherson, you take lead, Klein said. Probably easiest for everyone this way, he thought. McPherson, and everyone else, nodded in agreement, but he still asked, Anyone have a problem with that? No one said anything. Klein was sitting in the front of the passenger compartment, his back to the pilots. He could hear some chatter going on between them. Who's staying on the helo? McPherson asked. They all looked at each other, but no one volunteered. They all wanted in on finding such a potentially important objective. Romanoff, you stay. You'll be the one to bring the antivirals on board once we find them, he said. Klein was impressed by that. It was something you said in anticipation of an objection, to make them feel better about something even before they felt bad about it. Deftly handled, he thought. Klein focused on what was happening in the cockpit again. Turning and looking over his shoulder, he switched comm channels so he could hear their chatter. I'm telling you, the wind speed is spiking, one said to the other. You think it's already here? The other asked. Meanwhile, McPherson had become coaching. Let's be the ones to finish the mission first, guys. We'll drop in, block a way or two. Go in quick and quiet. Follow my lead. If there's anyone in our way, I'll make the judgment call on whether or not we go around or... At that moment, the helo banked hard to the right, and the pilot yelled, Brace for impact! Something slammed into the chopper, and everyone started spinning and going sideways while everyone grabbed whatever they could and tried to hold on. As they spun, the weapons they had taken slid to the sides of the helo. The side doors of the helo slid open, probably triggered by the pilots or an automatic mechanism preparing for a crash landing. But this meant all the guns on the floor slid out, tossed to the wind. Klein was on the left side of the chopper facing the rear, and he looked down, trying to figure out where they were. They had been passing over the south end of Madison Square Park, but now they were careening, going down slowly but moving in circles to the east. "Helo 3 to base, we are going down, Mayday!" yelled the co-pilot. "Repeat, Helo 3, declaring emergency, we are going down in Stewiestown." The co-pilot continued. Klein could see the ground coming up, and in a split second decided that it might be a better idea to jump out at a low level, rather than trying to ride out the crash. He released his harness buckle and looked out, trying to time it so that he might get thrown out onto something that wouldn't kill him instantly. He felt someone push him. He let go, feeling the centrifugal force pull him out of the chopper immediately. A moment of freefall, and then a bright flash of pain as he hit the ground sideways. His butt hit first, and he tried to remember some judo as he rolled twice and then threw out an arm and a leg to stop himself and spread out the force of the momentum. He winced as he felt something puncture his arm, but lay still for a moment, just taking some shallow, shaky breaths. There was a big crunching sound in the distance, and he knew the chopper had touched down. But then came the boom, and he knew the chopper was exploding.
Thank you for listening to Beyond Survival. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. There's more sections coming within the next week. Stay frosty.